a lot of the dysfunctions that we may feel in our life, the troubles that we have, the negative emotional cycles, the negative mental patterns that we may have in our lives, realize that that's not what you are. That's not who you are.
As of right now, just consider this to be recorded, because for you and I, because we have such a deep friendship and connection, I'm not treating this like a normal show where it's like, hey, Patrick, welcome to the show. Dude, yeah. I spent probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 really long hikes with you. I think we went hiking in Sedona, and you just struck me as one of the most woke people I've ever met. And this phrase gets like thrown around, you know, oh, this person's woke. This person has spiritual development, spiritual growth. But man, like your ability to take really large, complex meta-analysis, like macro stuff, and bring it down to the micro. That's just something I like about you, man. That's just something I enjoy about you, you know, having our conversations. And the world's in like this crazy place right now. You know, probably the most crazy, at least in our lifetimes, that we'll ever see. And what are you doing to stay centered right now? You know, let's just go right there, bro. Like, what are you doing to stay centered right now? Yeah.
Well, I think the overarching philosophy that came to me, the way to put it into words recently, was that, I mean, there's so many different narratives going on outside of us. There's so many different, like, you know, and it seems like everybody's looking to the outside to get a sense of what's happening to then determine how to respond to it. And for me, it was so chaotic that I was like, you know, what it came to me is like, when you can't trust anything outside of you, you can't trust the narratives outside of you, you have to be able to trust yourself. And so for me, it was like, well, what is that place of being, that kind of right relationship with myself, that when I get into that space, there's just a yes throughout my whole body. And to me, what that is getting into the kind of space that I get into from different meditative practices, or just breathing deep, or watching the sunset, these kinds of things. And the way that I feel is that when I'm in that space, then I make the best sense of my external reality. So instead of trying to look to my external reality to tell me how to feel, it was like, I'm going to feel right first and then use that to make sense of my external reality. So it's been meditation, it's been sunsets, it's been getting into nature as much as I possibly can. Yeah. And exercise has been really big, you know, keeping my diet clean, making sure I'm having enough herbs and getting all of my, my minerals and whatnot, and getting enough vitamin D. I think it's really important to get out in the sun.
Taking care of yourself, taking loving care of yourself. And this is something where, gosh, man, the ultimate journey took me out to Sedona, right, for my current partner, you know, my love, Carrie Michelle. And that's why I came out there through a mutual friend. I got to interview Anahata for a podcast and do some breath work. And then I met her out there. And then that's what actually drew me back out to live in Sedona. Most people don't know this. Like, I lived out there for 3 months. And what was so amazing was that one of the things I got to do was hang out with you. You know, we got to go on hikes and we got to have conversations. And I think what the world needs most right now is exactly what you and I do on the regular, you know, which is, hey, can we cut all the BS and like stop talking about the weather and actually explore what is consciousness and what we're doing here on the planet? Like, that's what I've really enjoyed about getting to know you. But what are you focused on right now? Like, with all that you're seeing in the media, and are you just focused on creating for the people that follow you? Or is there anything else that's like very top of consciousness for you? Like, what's top of consciousness for you in this current moment?
Well, there's a lot. You know, first, before I get into that, I want to say that, like, I feel the same thing for you too. It was beautiful because it was like, you know, we didn't know each other, but it was within, I don't know, a few back and forths that we dropped right into what was real and what was really there, what was really important, what's really going on with us. And that's something I really appreciate about people. And so right off the bat, I knew this is a brother for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now I think that there's a few different things that are up. One thing that I'm focused on is I just started a group called Anchoring in the Light. And it's a group it's a relatively small group. We got like 25 of us, and we're meeting on weekly calls and just being like a support group for each other going through this time. This is an interesting time where it's bringing everybody together in a strange way. Like I always thought that if something happened and people were brought together by a big event, it would be more in person.
Yeah.
But now it's like bringing people together via the internet. And so I felt the inspiration to reach out to people that were feeling like they were looking for a community to anchor in healthy sense-making skills, healthy balancing skills, like how to process craziness in the world, and just have a good support group of people that have relationships like you and I do, where we can just talk to each other and hang out, but then also be real about what's really going on.
Yeah, man.
And so I've been focused a lot on that recently.
I have to interrupt you because what I felt in my chest when you're explaining that was, it's so great to have friends. It's even better to have a friend who's really able to cut through the bullshit in life. And that's what I feel with you is like, there is this element right now in the world of people dealing with a lot of bullshit. Like there's lots of narratives going on. And I've even called you personally, like, multiple times just about my growth in relationship, about my growth in consciousness. And this is really cool, like bringing you on a podcast and showcasing your work, because what you're creating right now actually is what the world needs. People throw around that word like, oh, this is what the world needs right now. But no, they actually do. Have you already started to see the ripple effect of trauma come back to you, and people really need that connection?
Yeah, absolutely. I, like how I would imagine you probably are in your life, have been the person that very commonly our friends or family members, when they're going through something, they don't know how to process it, or they're kind of lost, or they're trying to make sense of things, want to kind of like strip it down to what's really real so they can see, what they're looking at and how to, weave through whatever situation they're going through. Yeah. I'm the one that they call up. I'm the one that they hit up. And I'm sure it's probably similar with you too. And so this has been a situation where, it's been a good opportunity to when people are feeling lost, when you can give them a kind of solace in the fact that like you're feeling good and you're feeling optimistic, and they're like, okay, I trust your opinion because you always have, good opinions about stuff, but I don't understand exactly how you're holding up that way. So now I'm more interested in what you're doing and how you're perceiving things, because obviously you're not kind of turned over in the same way a lot of other people are turned over from all these events. So yeah, I've been seeing people reach out to me for different reasons. I had some people that reached out to do like, some positive words for the world video that they were doing, so I did a little blurb for that. And I put out this little thing saying that I'm doing a little gathering every week so we can talk and kind of process stuff. And a bunch of different people that have been following me have hit me up because, I think that they can just feel that like when we come together and I'm able to share in real time for what's going on for them in their real time life, that there's a lot of fruit that comes from that.
What would you say that you actually do? It's hard to put you in a capsule. Like, I don't even know if that's possible, dude. Like esoterics, self-help, maybe relationships. You also have a music background. You teach people how to be present, how to be grounded. Like, you cover a lot of ground, man. You cover a lot of ground. Yeah. Like, for somebody just tuning in, just really connecting to who you are right now, what is it that you actually do here in the world?
Right. So, I am a bit of a generalist in ways, and it's been difficult for me to put terminology to what I do. One of the things that I keep coming back to, one of the terms I keep coming back to is this term of esoteric psychology. And I really like that because that kind of permeates everything I do. So whether it's my music, whether it's my relationship counseling, whether it's my just one-on-one coaching mentorship, it all kind of encapsulated in this esoteric psychology. And what I mean by esoteric psychology is it's very psychological, rational, analytical, break down a lot of different things that could be associated directly with the psychological world, but I bring an element of esoteric science to it that that to me makes it alive. It brings life into it, and it makes it so much more interesting to me.
One of the things I love on your site is you call yourself a transformational ally, which I'm like, yep. When I read that, I'm thinking, yes, this is exactly what he does. Because so many people right now, they're just starting, Patrick, they're like putting their toe in the swimming pool of consciousness, of spiritual growth, of understanding who they are. You know, there's so much more than this like bag of flesh. Transformational ally, you're not a coach though, or are you?
Well, you know, I don't particularly like the term coach because it reminds me of like my PE teacher in high school. So I use the term mentor. That's the one I like, mentor. So mentorship. But these terms are somewhat loose, so you could think of it as a coach. And some of my clients even loosely will say like, "Oh, this is my coach." But I use the term mentor. But yeah, so I guess you could say yes, I coach.
2009, I think, was when you started like your awakening process, right? Like 11 years ago, basically. Is that where it all began?
Yeah, well, I've had some I've had some key experiences when I was younger where it was like I tuned in these key moments at certain times, but then forgot it all afterwards and didn't remember it until like I kind of really stepped into it later. But yeah, 2009 was a major transformative year for me, for sure. And like from that point forward, my life has continued to change regularly in a transformative way.
Sometimes when I've talked to you, I remember we were hiking, I would get like full body energy shoots, and I don't necessarily experience that with many people. But there's something that you got. Like it's obvious, man, you're plugged into something. And I think it is source. It's source consciousness. So for people that don't know what happened in 2009, what was it? Like what actually turned the leaf over inside of you that made you walk the path to where you are now? Like what was it then?
Well, 2009 was a year when I decided to really follow my heart as far as my relationships go with humans in general. And in 2008, I was surrounded by a lot of people that were in a particular paradigm that was quite dominative and restrictive. Yeah. In 2009 was when I made the decision, you know what? I found this other kind of group of people that were extremely artistic, more of like you could say like the transformational festival kind of scene. And I found these people that like I could feel their heart. They were being creative. They were expressing themselves. They were, being outward. And I just went full into that. Yeah. And I said goodbye to this other lifestyle that was still kind of caught up in a lot of, you could say like mainstream thought patterns and moral systems. And I just went completely into this other realm. And there was plant medicines were a big part of that. And that was probably, I had done some earlier on and had some profound effects in my life. But when I was reintroduced to this new group of people, this is in the Ocean Beach area, actually, of San Diego. Yeah. Right near where you're from. Sure. When I was introduced to these people again, that was a part of the lifestyle and the scene there. And so I partook, and it blasted me back open in so many different ways that it was like there was no going back. And I know you've had that kind of experience also with the plant medicines. It's like sometimes when you walk through that door, literally the door behind you disappeared. There is no going back.
And I've turned around too, and I've been like, man, I guess I'm not going back there anymore. I guess there's no going back. And there's a part of me, I think, that if I had to do it all over again, I would have chosen this path anyways. But there's my ego, and there's a structure, and we can get into the ego for sure, because you've walked me through mine on multiple phone calls. But there is a structure of my ego that's like, I wonder what it would have been like if I never would have began to wake myself up to the truth, wake myself to the truth that pornography is not a good thing for me, wake myself up to the truth that drugs or alcohol or all these things in excess are not a good thing for me. And mine was in my early 30s. I'm going to say 2 to 3 years before I even started this podcast. So my mission and my whole vision with Wellness Force is to authentically share like what I'm going through. What does it mean to live our life well? How do we gather the right information? How do we apply it? And then most importantly, man, which makes me get chills when you and I go on a hike, how do we embody it? Because we all know, like when we're with somebody and they embody a certain type of intelligence or a certain type of energy, it can't be faked. So there's a process that you have took yourself through to embody whatever it is you got. I'm still trying to figure out what you got. I think it is source consciousness. I think it's just maybe a finely attuned
I'm trying
soul.
to figure it out myself too, man.
But there is something that, whether you call yourself a coach, a guide, a transformational ally, it's obvious through your YouTube channel and just meeting you in person and just seeing the type of work that you're doing online. People really trust you, and it's because of this embodiment. So what do you think it is, man? Like, what's been the recipe for your embodiment, and what do you think that embodiment actually is?
Yeah. So I could explain that on several levels. So you could say like embodiment from one perspective, and this would be more of like a mainstream perspective, is when theory turns into practice. So when you take something from like the mental realm where like I understand it, but then you can actually apply it. So it's the difference between being able to be a basketball coach that tells somebody basketball theory versus being Kobe and actually being able to play.
Yep.
Right. But when I think about it in terms of development as like a human soul, like from a more esoteric perspective, embodiment to me is literally the activation of your subtle spiritual bodies and physical body. Like the true activation. So in a sense, if you think of your heart as being like the circulatory system of your physical body, that you have energetic circulatory systems in your subtler bodies that can be activated. And until they're activated, then you're not fully embodied, because the higher esoteric wisdom that you might be philosophizing about isn't actually active and running. Like those rivers aren't running through your energetic structure. So embodiment to me very much is the practice of doing different practices that actually turn on your energetic body ecosystem.
The energetic body. So for people that don't know the energetic body, what do you mean by that? Is it just the fact that we are in a vessel that holds us, or what is the energetic body to you?
So one of the best ways of explaining that, I think, is in looking in nature. So if you look at a rock, you can tell that there's something different between the nature of a rock and a plant. So a plant has more of a life to it than a rock does. Like a plant, it's like a plant is breathing. It's like, it has this like emanation of life force inside of it, where a rock doesn't. And the difference between a rock and a plant is that a plant has an etheric body and a rock does not. Now, humans have etheric bodies also. And when a human is asleep, they're very much like a plant. They're still alive, but they don't have this animating form of consciousness that is kind of moving them around. Because their astral body is actually traveling in the astral realm. So a human has several bodies. It has an astral body and an etheric body and a physical body. Where a rock has a physical body, a plant has a physical body and an etheric body, but it doesn't have an astral body, and a human has all three.
Okay, so let's pause the tape there. Can you go back to that again? So the three that matter for us and how that relates to a rock and a plant, because a lot of people are already like, whoa, Patrick, wow, that's a lot.
Right. So what exactly is the question?
So what are the three again, so we know how those relate to us as humans?
Okay, so there's the physical, there's the etheric, and there's the astral.
Yep.
So 3 different bodies. And here's a good way of also understanding it is in Chinese medicine, we have the 12 meridians, right? Everybody's probably familiar with that, right? So the 12 meridians are in your physical body, right? Now now everybody on this show, probably that's listening, is probably familiar with the 7 chakras, right? Yes. Is that something that you think people are familiar with?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the 7 chakras that is your etheric body. And anybody that is familiar with Qigong and the 3 dantians, these are energy grail points in your astral body. So these are different points that exist. You can call them grail points, but they're kind of like energy centers that exist, that interpenetrate kind of, you could think, your physical body, but then also are core centers on these different, say, less dense body systems. So we have a physical body, the etheric body, and the astral body. And all three of these come together to create the consciousness that we experience as we go throughout our day and as we dream and travel around in the dream realm at night.
Man, there's so much more that meets the eye to us as human beings, like the physical, the etheric, and the astral. It's funny, like you were one of the first people that actually opened up my awareness that there are multiple realities. And when I'm feeling something, it might not always be mine. When I was out there in Sedona, I did a podcast with Mark Wolin, and he talked about past lives. And something that I know you've done a lot of videos on and that I so think is needed here is just an explanation of the fact that we are in one reality, Patrick. Like, this is one reality. It doesn't mean that it's the only reality. Like, what else do you sense is out there?
Oh, man. Well, that's a big question.
I like to do big questions because I love your answers, you know?
I think there's infinity out there, to be honest. I think it's endless. It's endless. But I could talk more about what I feel like maybe butts right up against to the reality that we live in here.
Yeah.
And so I think a good science metaphor is the idea that, you know, we have the light spectrum that's visible. And then we have, you know, infrared and gamma and radio waves and all these different levels that exist outside of the visible spectrum. And so it's very much like the idea that the five senses that we have are the senses that we can perceive with. But in order to perceive in different realms, you would need to develop sense organs in different realms. And this is part of like the embodiment that I'm talking about, right? So, you know, a psychic or somebody that can have certain esoteric visions is somebody that has activated a certain sense organ in a different realm. So you could just imagine, like, you know, if there's an animal that has no eyes, it can't see the physical realm. So it doesn't know that light exists, even though that light very much does exist.
Yeah.
But if that animal could learn how to give itself eyes, then it could see light. And it's very much the same process for humans, too, to be able to see into higher dimensions. So my personal experience as far as things that exist outside of this physical realm is, I think the easiest thing I think is probably most digestible for most people is the idea of the astral plane or the astral realm. And this in esoteric knowledge is considered like the first spiritual plane. And this is the realm that you go to when you are asleep and your astral body leaves your physical body. And it's less dense than this realm. So it's more permeable and more influential. Like you can influence it more easily with your consciousness. And there's different set of laws in that realm too. So you can travel vast distances very quickly. You could walk through walls or do all sorts of different things that you couldn't do necessarily in the physical world due to the kind of physics that exists there.
It's almost like a lucid dreaming state in a way.
Right. So this is where you would be when you were lucid dreaming, right?
Yeah.
In a lucid dream versus astral projection, you could think of that as kind of like a multiplayer versus single player game.
Yep.
Where a lucid dream is kind of like your own single player, and multiplayer game is when you're in the astral plane, it's like you're interfacing with like the interpenetrated template that other beings have access to also.
And the other beings is something that I felt not just with plant medicine, but also breath work. And even one of the phone calls you and I had just a couple of weeks ago was there was this like childhood wound, and there is still this childhood wound that I'm healing, and it's around my anxious attachment style. And there is something that we've explored on the show with many, many guests, you know, whether it's Stephen Kessler with the 5 personality traits, or whether with it's Mark and past life regression. There is something that I feel that I know a lot of other people feel. And that is sometimes as a grown man myself, or as a grown woman, whoever's watching or listening, there's certain things that come through me that I can tell aren't really me. Like I'll have certain thoughts that aren't mine, or I'll have certain things that I'm saying out of my mouth. And I'm like, okay, this is for me to actually become aware of, because I'm healing past generational sins and past generational pain. Where am I accessing that from? Like which one of these, the physical, the etheric, and the astral, like where is that coming from?
So when you're having, so when you're processing something else, so basically, there can be like, you could think of it as clouds of charge that build up in your energy fields regarding different things. But also you can think of it as like, there are different beings that exist in different dimensions. So it's like if you didn't have your physical body, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have an astral body. So you could still exist in the astral realm. And that's why you might be able to run into certain, personalities in the astral realm that are very much aware and conscious. And this is, the whole understanding behind like what ghosts are and, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on when you're talking about like when you're processing something that's not you, because I guess it could come from many different sources. One, it could just be, you could say like a distorted geometry that has embedded itself into your energy field due to trauma as a young child. Or it could be, and one way that may come about is that if you have a parent that has an unintegrated aspect of their shadow that is sitting inside their astral field, and then even in their etheric field, and then which could even manifest as some sort of ailment in their physical body too.
Yeah.
If that's going on in their field, and you're as a child kind of learning how to be on a subconscious level by taking the lead that your parent is leading, then you can inherit that same dysfunction within yourself. So it's not you necessarily, but you're inheriting a dysfunction that your parents probably even inherited from their parents or their parents, or, however far back it goes.
Yes.
Because, you go far enough back in any lineage, and there's been tremendous trauma that people have had to experience. So, I mean, if the parent hadn't had some kind of way of working through that, then inherently in their field, the child that is around them is going to inherit certain aspects of that, especially if they have some sort of trigger that can activate that kind of a similar kind of trauma too, which can make it very, very real inside of them in their lives.
Do you think that in your experience you've seen with clients, or maybe even with yourself, that people attract partners so that they can correct the misalignment in their field?
I think that is one of the key beautiful things about relationships, is that it requires a certain level of intimacy to be in a deep relationship for a long period of time, that you can't just show your best side to that person. You can't get away with, pretending that you don't have this stuff going on. It's going to bring it to the surface. Yeah. And so we're blessed to have relationships in our life where there's somebody else there that's willing to look at our flaws and love us through them. And we can do that with them also.
Yeah. The dots that were connected for me is that you were in, I think, a 7+ year relationship that, for people that probably already know, that if they've been on YouTube, Brigitte Nielsen, you're in a relationship for 7+ years, right?
It was almost 7 years. So,
almost 7 years. And so in those 7 years, I mean, I can't even imagine the kind of growth and really beauty that came from that. But what I want to just shout out to you right now and for the entire community is when you go to Patrick Haize Live on YouTube, there is a video that he and his previous partner put out, and it was done so beautifully and so much respect, so much reverence. I have not seen a conscious uncoupling or, essentially a breakup video done ever like that before. Like the way that you guys were able to navigate really one of the most painful experiences that most people go through. It's just a testament to the work you've done, that relationship. Like, what did you learn the most from that relationship? What did you garner the most from her?
If I was to put that into one thing,
maybe it's many.
So many different things. One thing I really learned from Brigitte is how to let go of a lot of things and have more fun. She's really great at that. Being able to, I came from an interesting past, and I used to worry a lot more when we first got together. She's helped me to let go a lot and to just go for things. It's been really cool. She, her and her father have had a big influence on me in that way. They're both, there's just like free souls. There was like something beautiful about how she was raised, and her father has done so much of his own personal work to create a space like that for her to grow into the person that she was. Yeah. That to be part of that family, it was like, it almost felt in a lot of ways where I adopted a father, the father that I never had. Yeah. And like the sister that I never had, like in a different way with Brigitte. You know what I mean? She was like, because beyond our romantic relationship, we've always, we had a deep romance when we were together. There was always this kind of like soul family kind of vibe thing. Like there's a kinship, and it's funny. A lot of people would see us and they'd be like, you guys look like brother and sister. And it's like, and even now, I mean, we're broken up, but she's still my best friend, Mm-hmm. I'm actually at her house right now doing this recording. So it's like, so much has came from that, and then as far as like interpersonal stuff, it showed me a lot about at what points I go unconscious and kind of like flip into a trance state that is a result of being a trauma being triggered.
Yeah.
In me. And I think that this is probably actually common for most people. Like if you use relationship for this benefit, that you start to realize that there are certain things that when someone says something a certain way, or you experience something from a certain angle, it like a switch goes off, and all of a sudden now you're processing these kind of like automatic thought responses and emotion responses, and you're kind of acting from this like sub awake space.
Yeah.
And so in being able to, have her as somebody that was there, that could see me doing that and that could respond to me doing that, and vice versa, we would do this for each other. We could, when one of us could stand and hold space while the other person was moving into a trance, it kind of like, it's like you can feel all the eyes turn on you, and you're like, oh, wait a second. What am I doing right here? I totally just went unconscious.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Now I'm aware of that.
Oh, man.
And I think that's, one of the things that relationships can do really well. You know what? Let me grab I got to grab my charger really quick.
Yeah, go for it. So while Patrick is gone, I'm just going to riff here. One interesting thing that I felt in my own relationship is, when do I actually go unconscious? And I found that when I go unconscious, what happens is the young man inside starts driving. And we all have it. Like there's a young man, there's a young lady. And what happens is without the process of doing the work, like the real process of doing the work, I have found that if my meditation is off, if my movement is off, if I'm eating unhealthy foods, if I'm not connecting with spirit, if I'm not just taking care of myself, if I'm not actually being the human being full of self-love that I actually am, that's when I go off the rails. And so this is what Patrick is talking about is, conscious relationship is the ultimate crucible for growth. I experience it all the time. And I actually think that's part of the beauty. And one of the things that I have been feeling lately in this whole unconscious thing that you mentioned is when I go unconscious, I freeze. It's almost like a deer in the headlights. And I'll speak from a masculine perspective because I'm a man in a man's body, but I know it's the same for all humans. When we get to that triggered place, when we're in that state of paralysis, like, oh my gosh, there's a trigger that's flared up. There's usually a lack of breath. What are the key principles? What are the key practices when we're in that inflection point to soften us, to relax us, to get us more conscious and not be coming from an unconscious place of anger and fear and constriction? Like, what does that look like for most people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the way I kind of describe when we're saying responding, or responding would be the right word, reacting from within a triggered space.
It's like,
right.
Get away from me.
It's what it very much is like it's like we're being puppeted by a negative emotional force is what it feels like. It's like you're literally being puppeted by this other force, and you're responding in a way that you wouldn't choose to respond if you had control. So I think the first thing is starting to notice what kinds of things tend to trigger you, and then kind of getting to the bottom of the underlying wound behind whatever it is that's triggering you. Yeah. So that's the first thing. So then you can kind of be aware, and you can even give yourself kind of like a forewarning. Like if you're walking into an environment where there's a high trigger probability, because the things that trigger you, then you can kind of be more on watch. And so then what happens is that you can pay attention to the signs. And this has so much to do with your body awareness, because your body is telling you everything. And this is one of the major things that happens, is that when you get triggered, it's almost that like the emotional outbursts or the rants that you go on in your head, or like the things that you'll say when you're triggered, are in a sense an attempt to avoid feeling the pain that you're feeling in your physical body, which is like that locking that you feel.
Yes.
And so while the locking is locking you, in trying to escape from it, you start projecting the pain out onto other things and making it this fault or that fault, or getting angry or justifying what all this is. Where it can be a lot more powerful, though, is to, when you feel that come up, to bring your awareness directly to your body and not let it penetrate into your mind. Because what happens is once an emotion, a negative emotion or a trigger penetrates into your mind, then you start generating thought that is of the same nature as that emotion, which then perpetuates more of that emotion and creates this cyclical like thought to emotion spiral that starts spinning you out. Mm-hmm. So what I found is that when I start to feel my body going into a locking state from a trigger, that the best thing I can do is bring my consciousness directly back into my body. And actually what I'll do is I'll use my mind to narrate what's happening physiologically, like in the senses of my body, so that I have a job for my mind. So my mind doesn't run away with trying to blame this person or, come up with this story or, go through whatever cycles that it goes through. So the idea is to be really aware of the body, and you can feel when the dominoes start tipping. You usually feel like a tightness in your solar plexus or in this band, like right underneath your floating ribs right there, as it tightens up a lot. You're like heat. I'll feel like heat in my forehead and my hands when I start getting triggered and these kinds of things. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling that. And so then I'll narrate that. Oh, okay, I'm feeling heat in my forehead and my hands. I'm feeling a knot in my, and just be there with it. Not try to get rid of it, but just be there with it. And then I notice that when I'm there with it and I'm just kind of like going along with it and experiencing it, and then ideally starting to bring a little bit of like self-mentorship into the process. In other words, like, okay, I'm feeling tightness in my stomach, but it's okay. I'm here and I'm breathing through this. I'm feeling the heat in my head and it's okay. And I can breathe deeply, and kind of coach myself through it in the moment and use my mind for that process. That lets the energy move through, as opposed to locking it and then blaming it on something else and not processing the energy properly.
Mark my words, we're going to take that 3 minutes of gold that you just did, and we're going to create a separate video of that. And the title is going to be How to Be With Your Trigger. Because, man, I think so many of us, we want to like identify the trigger and then get rid of it. Well, meanwhile, the trigger is a teacher. I mean, the trigger is coming up to show us something, to give us something. And has there been something that you've recognized? Because this is not Josh's therapy session, although it seems like it sometimes, because that's the show, right? I'm sharing what I'm learning. And then, my hope and my desire, my burn is that it reaches somebody else who's going through a lesson that I'm going through. Because it's all of us, y'all. We're all going through the same universal lessons and different degrees of consciousness. But for yourself, man, like, how have you seen a large trigger come up on a regular basis, maybe currently or in your past, that you worked through, and how did you work through it? Because this is why people come to you, because they want to work through something. Like, this is what you do. Right.
Well, so I used to have a major insecurity of not being listened to and not heard. And so a big thing for me that I remember was really big was that if I was speaking to somebody and they just turned their head away, especially when I was saying something I was passionate about. They turned their head away, stopped paying attention, and started doing some other thing. It would strike this wound inside me as a child that I had from a child of like my parents not listening to me, or me having something that was really important to say and feel like no one was there to receive me for that. And so I remember that, I don't know, quite a few years ago, probably 9 or 10 years ago, this was like a big thing. It was like I was really working really hard to learn how to articulate myself so that I could express some of these things that I experienced that I knew had value, but were hard to bring into words. Yeah. And so I would be really passionate about these things that I was saying. And, due to whatever was going on, sometimes like right in that, it's almost like the world was showing me my shadow, and it would sometimes time things perfectly.
Somebody would turn their cheek and you'd be like triggered.
Exactly. Yeah. In a way, it would be like I'm really getting into something, and someone's like, "Oh, hey," and start talking about something else, and then like not even pay attention to what I was saying.
That still bothers me, man. It bothers me.
And it's still kind of annoying, right?
Yeah, it's annoying.
But that used to like make me sink when that happened, and so part of it, so there's different levels to work on it, right? So what I just gave in that last explanation was what to do kind of like physiologically with your body in the moment, because that's how you framed the question.
Yeah.
So the other layer of how to work on it too is understanding what your triggers are and where they're coming from, and then reprocessing and reframing them in your off time. And when you were saying it's like you want to know what the trigger is and get rid of it, it's like, yes, you do, but it's not the time to do that like right in the middle of the trigger.
Yeah.
It's the time to observe what's going on with your body, and then you can think about it later on and kind of get to the underlying causes on your own. So in kind of uncovering what the underlying cause was and my, lack of healthy attention that I got as a child and all these different things, I came to realize and that, this was an overreaction to the situation. And when somebody turns their head away, they're doing it because of themselves. They're not doing it because they don't want to hear what I'm saying necessarily. Yeah. Maybe they are. And even if they are, well, that's fine too. They're allowed to do that. And if I know what I'm doing, if I know what I have has value for me, then that's all that really matters. So with that understanding, I can reframe the situation. And then with a healthy contemplation on that reframe over a period of time, I was able to, and combined with in the moment triggering, coming into my body and just being aware of it instead of going into this I'm not good enough kind of scenario in my head.
Yeah.
Then what I was able to do is that with that consciousness that I had developed of being able to stay present in my body, with that mentor voice that I was talking about earlier, I can say to myself, okay, you're feeling a tightness in your chest, and it's okay. This person is distracted because they're distracted because this thing came up, or it's because of them, whatever it is. They saw this thing. And that it doesn't reflect on you or anything that you're saying. And you can trust and know that what you're saying is valid and powerful to you, and that's good enough. And that feels good. And so I could go through that process. And after going through that enough times, it becomes your response to it, as opposed to something you have to work to create.
Man, so much gold there. Like, I think about the book that you turned me on to, The Art of Learning. And Josh Waitzkin, right, was the author?
Yeah.
And you actually, I saw on your Instagram a few weeks ago, you'd posted this. You said, growth comes at the point of resistance. We learn by pushing ourselves and finding what really lies at the outer reaches of our abilities. The point of resistance for all of us, either in relationship with another person or in learning how to better love and be in relationship with ourselves, is the resistance. Like, there is something about this resistance, man. I don't know what it is. Sometimes it almost seems like syrupy sweet. It's like a tail of a octopus wrapping me around and pulling me down into this place that seems so familiar. And the resistance comes when I am angry at being pulled down rather than when I'm curious about why I'm being pulled down. Mm-hmm. Can you riff on that? Like, is curiosity a tool set that you use in your coaching? Like, how do we truly embody curiosity when we're in the trigger space, when we're in that resistance space?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Well, when you talk about that, what that reminds me of and how I use it, it's very applicable to exactly what you were talking about. But how I traditionally is a funny word. How I typically talk about that is in our judgment for other people, is that replacing condemnation with interest is really, really a powerful practice. And but this works for yourself also, right? And a lot of the triggers that we have come from judgments that we have for ourselves, right? And we don't want to feel the judgment that we're feeling for ourselves, because it's like condemnation for yourself is like poisoning yourself. It feels terrible. So when you're feeling that, you want to blame something else or get mad at another situation or come up with an excuse for why it's not your fault or whatever it is. And so when you're in that triggered space, being interested at what's going on brings the clarity to be able to help solve the problem. But this also, in an interpersonal way, is magic for being able to overcome judgments not only for other people, but for yourself too. Because the less you judge other people, the less you judge yourself. And so then the process is, instead of becoming angry at somebody else or condemning them or judging them for doing something that is, might be right out inappropriate or wrong, or even disgusting, right? Yeah. But instead of judging that, because that judgment is an energy that is still poisonous even to you just for feeling it. It's not going to enlighten you. It's not going to better your life to feel that vibration. But with a compassionate interest that I wonder what traumas this person has gone through that brought them to this place. I wonder what it was about their upbringing that made them so oblivious to the actions that they're taking right now. That kind of interest or curiosity, as you say, that kind of interest or curiosity brings you into a whole different emotional bandwidth that makes available for you all kinds of powerful wisdom that you wouldn't be available otherwise. And the more that you can understand somebody else deeply and the struggles that they've been through, not only the better will your life be because you're not going to be getting triggered by seeing other people, but the more valuable you're going to be to people like that. And the more you're going to be able to help them because you're going to have been able to go and figure out what's actually going on underneath and then glean the wisdom from that understanding and then use that to serve people and yourself in the future.
One of the things I've bonded with you on many times is our affinity for Alan Watts and the way that he is able to articulate ideas. And sometimes when you speak, man, I almost feel like you're downloading a little bit from Alan Watts. Like it's really cool to witness it because, you know, he's no longer here, but yet his wisdom carries on. And when you were speaking, I was just imagining what Alan Watts said, where he said, nature hates a vacuum. You know, nature hates a vacuum. So when there is an energy or a dark matter of, I'm judging this person, how dare they do this? What the hell is wrong with them? It's creating a vacuum. So if I can, on the other side of the vacuum, say, I'm having a hard time dealing with this. This is making my solar plexus tight. Okay, why is that making my solar plexus tight? All of this introspection and curiosity comes from a choice. It comes from somebody fucking deciding to take it the other way. So how do you do this with clients and how do you do this with yourself to decide in that moment? Like, all right, you know what? I'm going to choose curiosity. I'm going to be the antidote to judgment, which is compassion. Like, how do you take yourself there?
Right. Yeah. Well, in my experience, I think that education is the key to making good decisions. And what I mean by that is like awareness is alchemical. And what I've found is that if you can create the proper awareness around something where people realize what they're actually doing, then they start to self-correct once they see what's going on. Yeah. Where people continue down negative patterns is usually when they can't see what they're doing. And even if they can see what they're doing on some level, there's usually this shadow aspect that they don't understand about themselves and how they're modulating their emotions and their consciousness that they're not aware of that is keeping them tethered to the kind of negative behavior. So the choice to do it really isn't possible until there's an awareness there of like, oh, this is actually what I'm doing. And now I see that when I respond this way, it has this negative result. And the process of how I'm responding this way is that when I get triggered, this is, you know, how my body reacts. And I go directly into this, you know, kind of trance state and whatever it is. When you can look at that whole and observe that whole situation and be aware of it and trace it consciously, then you develop awareness. And then that awareness naturally, like any human in any situation, you know, you could give somebody $1 million, they have all this money, but then 2 weeks later, they'll be able to find some other problem that they can improve in their life. You can set someone in any place and eventually they'll look around and say like, oh, I could move this here and make it better and make my reality better by doing this. But you have to have enough of an understanding of what you're looking at to be able to see where the gaps are and where you can fill in the gaps and improve things. So it really just comes back to the education and the awareness. And then at that point, then the solutions start to arise.
All right, you guys, I just got the chills again. This is the same thing that happened when we were on that hike, man. And I think when we get chills, it's just our body, our physical body, connecting with another energetic body that something is true. Because I'll never forget this, man. I was at the Heaven House with Paul Chek 2 years ago, and he said, you know, our body's 90% water. And so when we speak the truth to someone else, or when we hear the truth within ourselves, all the water in our body activates. Because it's connecting with the body that we live in. So it's our
like
body
the ASMR effect.
Exactly. So that's what I feel from you. What you just said right now, this ability to pause and be curious and go within. Like this is exactly what you're doing in your programs. I know you have this meditation guide for energy body cultivation. It's an esoteric meditation guide, right? Esoteric meditation.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that part of the tool set that allows people to get down in there so they can catch themselves before they haul off with the trigger and say something from fear?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In this particular, package or this course that I put together is, one of the practices in it is finding the still point in between your thoughts and your emotions. So there's a very, precise posture and, whole practice that you go through in order to get into the space. But one of the things that it offers us is the ability to experience the experience of not thinking and not feeling emotions, so that you can start to observe your thoughts and emotions clearly enough to understand the nature of them and how they move you, which when you develop that power, it is extremely profound, because then at that point, you can start feeling into the nature of a thought or an emotion before it fully crystallizes and starts moving you around, and then choose whether this is something that is something you want to manifest and animate.
You're stuck in the vortex at that point.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And so yes, that's a big part of it, is getting to the silent point to be able to observe yourself. How do you become more aware of what you're doing? What tools and techniques can we use to observe ourselves from the correct perspective to give us the insights that are necessary for us to self-correct? And this is why mindful meditation in general has been, throughout the ages so powerful, because it's simply just saying, how do you become quiet enough to perceive what's actually going on? How do you become mindful of what's actually happening? And this is how a child learns. Before a child is developed in their higher mind and can think more analytically about things, how they learn is not by analyzing things. It's just by watching things until the patterns make sense. They just make sense eventually.
Absolutely.
Right? But they're not like evaluating, okay, wait, so he used this and maybe this is why it's working or that. They're not thinking like that. You're just watching something until all of a sudden it just makes sense. And while it's really powerful to be able to analyze and use these different skills, oftentimes we get in our own way because we try to project our idea of what we think things are on top of the reality, as opposed to just sitting there and watching it until the pattern makes sense. And so part of the mindful meditation and part of the practice that I teach is how to get back into that space where you can just watch yourself subjectively until you can see those patterns, and then they just make sense. And then once that awareness becomes available to you, then that is the alchemical initiation. It's like the alchemy you just start to naturally correct yourself once you realize what the dysfunction is within you.
I love this word alchemical, and you're one of the few people that I hear use it. How do you see that applying in modern day life? Like when you say alchemical, what two things are you connecting?
When you say two things,
or maybe there's more, the definition of alchemical and how that relates to us here. What is alchemical?
Okay. So I feel like life in general is an alchemical process. And by alchemical, I mean one way of saying that I feel is like maybe a little bit less magical feeling. It doesn't have as much of the umph, is transformational.
Got it.
Right? Is that like an alchemization is transformation, but it's but alchemical has this essence of like it is divine. In a way that maybe transformation doesn't carry that same kind of like pack of a punch to the word. Yeah. And so alchemical, is in ancient alchemy was transforming base metal into gold. And a lot of the esoteric practices is energy body alchemy. So some of the things that I teach and some of the things that some really high, and I'm not a master, I'll be clear about that. But some of the things that a lot of the different masters of the ages teach is how to alchemize your energy bodies and your consciousness. And this is done by, first becoming aware, bringing presence and awareness to what's going on. And that awareness has a purity to it that starts the alchemical process in and of itself, just being aware of what's going on. And so alchemy is very much connected to the transformation that we can do psychologically, emotionally, physically, on all levels of consciousness. There's a certain level of alchemy going on. And this life, this world is like an alchemical cauldron. Yeah. There are all these different pressures. You were talking about relationships. There are all these different catalysts that are coming through all the time that are very much acting like a kind of like an initiation of sorts, where it's like it's putting a certain chemical near another chemical that's causing a catalytic reaction. And the process that you go through when you're being triggered by different things and like learning how to be aware of it is this alchemical process where it's like you're taking all of that energy and you're literally transmuting it into wisdom, awareness, presence,
yes,
strength, beauty, all these different things. And that's the beauty of being here in this world, is that we're able to, have this experience that gives us the capacity to grow as a soul.
It makes me think of the book from Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, his journey, the shepherd and everything he went through to get to the treasure. And we communicate so much in this world by logistical figures. And this is why I think your work is so popular. This is why you're becoming more and more known, is like the esoteric world and the world of story and of myth, whether you follow Joseph Campbell or not. We all resonate with stories, man. If you were to go to one of the old shamans, one of the questions that they would ask you for millennia would be, when did you stop telling stories? If somebody was sick, they would ask them, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop telling stories? When did you stop not honoring the mystery of life? When did you stop sitting around a fire and spending time with other people? There's a core aspect to us being here on the planet that we're sharing, and that is, can we sit with our men and can we sit with our women and can we tell stories? Like, what is the story aspect that you plug into your work? Do you use story and metaphor in your esoteric courses and your programs? Like, how does that work for you and your students, really?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think story is key, because without a story of what a human is and what their purpose is on the planet, then how can there be any purpose to life? And I think this is part of the issue that we've ran into with the high levels of nihilism in the world, is because science has come out with the kind of narrative that is, and this is more mainstream traditional science that I'm talking about here, that reduces the story of what humanity is to facts that are empirically measured.
Yeah.
And then tries to wrap a story around that. That's the funny thing, is like, they would say scientifically you're not supposed to put a story on anything. You're supposed to just observe the facts. But still, I think it's impossible for a creature to observe anything and not create some sort of story to it.
That's how we reconcile
meaning.
That's how we reconcile meaning. Yeah.
It's what meaning is. So, whether the scientist is, regardless of how they're interpreting it to fit into some story of what they think the world is, whether the story they're telling themselves is that there is no story and there's just facts, well, that's still a story they're telling themselves.
Yeah.
Oof. So I think that that story, the thing, this is something that religion, that one of the positive aspects of religion has had on the consciousness of humanity. And there's a lot of negative things that have come with religion also. But, in ancient times, and even till quite recently, the primary story that people followed was a religious kind of story. A story that told them what a human being was on this earth plane and what their purpose is, and it gave meaning and a set of morality and like a code of ethics to humanity. And what has happened with the scientific world is that since the story now that has emerged surrounding reductionist scientism, and I call it scientism because it's like a weird religion in its own right,
sure,
is we're a mistake on a spinning rock in the middle of nowhere. Like some amino acids got together and then all of a sudden like this, we just like mutated into these like, beings, and your consciousness is inside your brain. There's nothing beyond that. And when you die, it's all over. So of course, then the collective narrative is going to be, give me all the resources.
Yeah.
Gimme. There's, morality is going to be out the window because nothing else matters. And then people fall into this depression of nihilism because like, what's the point of life? There is no meaning to life.
Yes.
And so story is absolutely important. And I don't think necessarily that there's one particular story that is, say, right or wrong, but rather it's because I think this thing is so much more vast than one articulation, that there's not a way of crystallizing it into one way of saying it that's going to be universal. Yeah. But I think that the universal principle is the principle that delivers well-being, empowerment, beauty, and upliftment. Like, I think that these are the qualities to look for, the virtuous qualities that are a result of the story that people hold, is what helps determine how true that story is.
There's such a powerful book that I read 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Start With Why, Simon Sinek. And he was like, people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. So that right there just shatters all science. Nobody cares about a widget. They care about why the person selling the widget cares. And it activates and awakens that story and that belief and that meaning and that juice inside of them. Like, people come to people now because of how they see that person showing up. So, you know, somebody might watch one of your amazing videos on YouTube, or they might hear you on Wellness Force, or they feel something from you. What exactly is that? You know, like, this is why I love Jam with you, man, because we get really, really esoteric and deep on certain things. But there is something of a truth resonance. Like, our tribe attracts certain levels of truth. Like, your vibe attracts your tribe. So what do you think it is about you that's attracting people to you now based on a couple years ago? Like, you've gone through one hell of an evolution.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's probably a few different things. One of the things I hear really commonly from people is that I help to organize their experiences in a way that they can understand them better. So it's like, if you've had an experience before, but you haven't really, you know, grokked it cognitively yet, then when somebody explains it to you, there's this like level of relief and like appreciation. You're like, oh yeah, now I get it at this different level. It's like you knew it on some level, but you didn't quite understand it in an intellectual way. So I can help people with that in understanding different things. I've spent a lot of time kind of picking myself apart and figuring out how to bring these things into words. You know, but I think the other part of it is that it's just, you know, people that have a genuine passion to be the best person that they could be, to go out into the world and make it a better place, to speak authentically from the center of who they are. That it's like a like attracts like you're saying, tribe attracts tribe. Yeah. And so I feel like the people that are genuine can feel that in me also, and they appreciate that. And you know, and it's funny to think like all the different things. I mean, you're talking about attracting different partners due to, I don't know if you use the word karmic, but that's how I was thinking of it. It definitely attracts other partners for karmic, you know, resolution in some way. Yeah. You know, I think there's a lot of that also. It's like different people can be the voice for the same truth, but they can color it in a certain way that speaks to different people, that doesn't speak to other people, you know? And so, you know, the way that I color it, I attract certain people that feel like, you know, it speaks more directly to their experience of reality. And, you know, and I think that anybody that actually truly follows their divine inspiration, like their true passion, is going to produce things and create things in the world that other people are going to love and be attracted to. And that's what inspires them. It's like the divine orchestration of when you feel inspiration within yourself, that force that is causing you to feel inspired, that you're feeling embodied with inspiration from, that force is also aware of all those other people that would benefit from it. And that's why it's this kind of like psychic co-creation that's going on. And so when you don't follow your inspiration, if you're sitting, you know, if you're ignoring your inspiration, you're prohibiting the rest of the population from the gifts that they could benefit from. It's like you hold a medicine that heals a certain aspect of the world's suffering. And if you don't follow your inspiration and put that medicine out there, then that demographic or those people will continue to suffer.
Oh, and it's not about shaming people. Like I'm not going to sit here with Patrick and be like, it's a disservice if you don't share your gifts. I'm just tired of people saying that. Like, yes, it is a disservice if you don't share your gift and your soul knows it wants to share it. Yes, then that is a disservice. But it's not a blanket statement that every single human being on the earth is going to one day have a YouTube channel, have a podcast, create things online, serve a big community. Like, that's not for everyone. But if you're getting something lit up inside yourself right now, that it is for you, well, trust that it probably is, right? Like, I'm sure you get a lot of people that come your way that are dealing with that back and forth. Should I go out? Should I speak my truth? Should I do my thing? Like, are you attracting these kind of people?
Absolutely. And when I say express yourself and to speak your truth, some people speak or express their truth by doing art alone.
Yeah.
Some people following their passion has nothing to do with being a public figure whatsoever.
Exactly.
It could be being the best mother in the world and taking care of your kids. It could be going and being a monk and meditating inside a cave and sending love out to the collective on a regular basis. It has nothing to do with being a public person. Now, you and I are in the public realm, and I a lot of people are like, yes, you have to get out, but it's not, it's not a cookie cutter thing.
Sure.
Where every person needs to be out there, like on podcasts or doing YouTube channel or anything like that. But I do believe that it is, you could say it's, what's the right word? It's sad, and it's almost, I could say it's disrespectful to creation if you feel like a burning desire to do something, whatever it is. Just go and live in the woods and fish out of the river, like whatever it is, that thing that your soul is calling you to do. Yeah. For you not to do that is a disservice, I believe.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we clarified. Yeah, because I didn't want people to think that it was, I'm telling everyone to go out and just be a YouTube
for sure.
spokesperson.
And neither am I, because that came up with a podcast I did last week. And it's like, right now, we're all in confinement, essentially. Like, we're being confined. And that's a whole nother podcast probably we could talk about, is like why I actually believe that this virus is Mother Earth giving us a signal. But how do you see this immersive part of your work with people, when they are kind of faced to look in the mirror? Right now, so many people, man, are being really forced to look in the mirror. How do you take somebody through that immersion? I know you have an immersion process that you take people through. So if somebody is feeling that call, like, how would they go through that with you? What does that look like?
When you say the call, you mean like a call to stepping into doing what they feel they want to do?
I mean, like the hero's journey calling them, and maybe it's been ringing for like 5 years, and they're like, okay, I'm going to pick it up one day. I keep feeling this message come through.
Right.
Yeah. How do you take them through that?
Right. Well, a lot of what blocks people oftentimes is the fact that at a young age, they had all sorts of inspirations. I mean, you never see a child that isn't inspired.
Yeah.
That isn't in wonder of the world, when they're young and they're running around and just like, entranced and captivated by all of the, the things in this world. But then somewhere along the line, people get cut off from that inspiration and that wonder. And so oftentimes how that happens is that we'll have inspirations as young children to do specific things, but we reach these impasses. And the impasses have to do with, either maybe our parents will tell us not to do that. And so then this thing that we were associated with as being really fun, whether it's like being loud and rambunctious, but every time we get animated and let that level of expression come out, we're getting yelled at.
Yes.
So that like the repetitive reprimandation creates a negative association with what once was an inspiration, was like a natural calling. And so you can think of like a parent's job as very much like, how do you help shape them so that they're not completely disrespectful of convention and order, but that you don't put the spark out at the same time, like they still have that inspiration. So oftentimes when I'm working with people, we work to uncover what some of these inspirations were before they got covered up by negative experiences that discolored what it was that inspired them. A lot of people, may felt like, well, they wanted to be a dancer, but then they had a dance teacher that, kind of ruined the experience for them. Yeah. So now when they think of dancing, they remember that trauma as opposed to remembering how alive it made them feel before they felt that trauma. So it's like trying to find where those threads are before they hit the impasse and blocked them, and then reframing and giving themselves permission to start exploring it again from more of a clean slate, and seeing what inspires them once they kind of get past some of those blocks that they had.
Dude, now I get it. Now I understand why you're the ally, because this is way different than a typical coaching process. Like, even that word coach, it does bring up, like, when I played football, like my coach would be like, dude, 50 more push-ups, God damn it. Like the aspect of coaching has really metamorphosized into, I think, really just people wanting a guide people wanting an ally, people wanting somebody they can trust that's been there before. And like, man, you've absolutely been there. Like, we have to have you come back on the show to talk about the earlier portions of your life and how you pull from those. But for somebody that's like feeling the inspiration in this moment, where do they go? Like, how do they connect with you in this regard of transformation? I mean, this is like what the earth really needs right now, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can find me at patrickhaize.com/sessions with Patrick. And that's PATRICK. And then the Haize is HAIZE. So patrickhaize.com/sessions with Patrick. That's where I have all of my packages for my mentorship. You can also find me at YouTube at youtube.com/Patrick Haize, HAIZE, live, LIVE. That's my YouTube channel. You can look me up, Patrick Haize, on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me there too. And if you keep your ears and eyes open, I will be putting up a course here really soon on meditation. And it might actually, by the time that this is released, it might be up. So if you go to my website under courses at patrickhaize.com, I'll have this meditation course that I explained earlier during the podcast.
You know, speaking of meditation, the thing that I always love getting the answer for, sometimes I don't always get the answers I want, but the thing that I love getting the answer for is, how do we define, how does Patrick define, how does Josh define, how does anyone with us define wellness? Like, how would you actually define the embodiment of wellness? And for you, it's specific. So that's the first thing, is I'd love to ask you to answer that. And then afterwards, if you're willing, could you guide us through something where we can just drop in and just get centered in this time of confusion and people in their pain bodies? So the first thing is, how would you define wellness? And the second thing, could you lead us through something where maybe somebody suffering right now could really connect with you and feel you?
Yeah, absolutely. So wellness, how would I define wellness? Well, it's one of these funny things because it's a subjective thing to a certain degree, but then it's also objective in the same sense that you can see when someone's doing well. Like it's obvious when someone is doing better, right? And one could argue that that if you're looking at it from a vibrational perspective, that wellness has something to do with opening up your vibration. It's like a freeness, a feeling of freeness, of freeing yourself, less stuck. Yeah. You're more capable of being dynamic. You're more able to move freely. You're more able to let that inspiration that you feel inside of you move you without inhibitions to express yourself in the way that feels most right to you. I think wellness is having a good relationship with what you know to be right in the holistic sense of your being. What feels right, what you know intellectually to be right, what you know emotionally to be right, what your body knows to be right, which translates as health. And I think our relationship to the ability to express ourselves from a pure place, that is directly linked to our wellness, I would say, how well we are.
I mean, that was just, hearing you talk about that was just like so calming to my nervous system, because I don't care who you are. It's like, if you really cut away all the noise and you just sit with where exactly you are in this moment, I think most of us know what feels right. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think you can ask anybody if they've ever had the experience where there was a point, whether something happened or it didn't, you're just in some sort of situation in life where an option came up and you just knew that this was right. This was the right thing for you. It feels right on all levels. It's almost like it animates you to move forward directly into it with no resistance. And it was just, there was nothing more right about that moment. It's like a perfect moment.
Yeah.
You just know everything was right.
Yeah.
And everyone's had those experiences, and so it's tapping into how to engineer those experiences more consciously, and how to let that natural flow just be a part of your rhythm.
PatrickHaize.com is the website, patrickhaize.com/sessions with Patrick. Patrick is a great friend of mine. I really love you, bro. I love what you represent to the world. I honor the way that you allow people to express themselves. If anybody is dealing with depression or a lack of self-expression, which is really what I think depression is, reach out to Patrick. Let him know that you heard him on Wellness Force, and share this podcast with somebody that you care about. Because, man, right now, expression is our birthright, like it always has been. And so if somebody is feeling that way, Patrick, can you guide us through something that you may be able to reach them with right now? You know, a meditation of sorts, or maybe even just some words here, just to say goodbye to the people that are feeling that way.
That are feeling depressed or blocked.
We're depressed, blocked, maybe in their own way. People that just need some sort of sign. People that are looking for a sign.
Well, I think that, as I was mentioning earlier, I really think that this point of being able to come into awareness of yourself very much is the key to unlocking the blockages that we have in life in general. And, you know, a lot of the dysfunctions that we may feel in our life, the troubles that we have, the negative emotional cycles, the negative mental patterns that we may have in our lives, realize that that's not what you are. That's not who you are. These are just patterns of behavior that are very much correlated to your neurological myelination of the neurons in your brain. So what happens is that people will develop negative habits, and it'll wire a certain pattern of thinking or behaving into their brain. In the same way, if you wire a dance move, then you do the move better and better until it's really easy to do. You wire thought patterns in your brain. But then what happens is if you wired unhealthy thought patterns in your brain, then you have all these experiences that are a reflection of those unhealthy thought patterns. You start to believe that you are the experience that you're having. You start to believe that you are these negative things that you've been thinking. But that's not what you are. What you are is that rightness that we were just talking about. And that's why it feels so right. That's why it feels so good. It's like if you put on a shoe that doesn't fit, it's not going to feel good because it doesn't fit you. Same thing with if you're feeling negative all the time. It's not you. And that's why it doesn't feel good. It's just a pattern you've been stuck in. And you can rewire those patterns. You can repattern yourself. And in that repatterning, you can learn how to get back that original inspiration that is your true nature. And you can wire yourself to be in alignment with that true expression. So I think the biggest sticking point is people get stuck in this identity of this is who I am. But no, that's just the way you've designed your brain for the moment. And you can design it a different way. You can learn how to have a different experience. So it's not you. What is you is determined by that sense of knowing that this is right. That overwhelming sense of this is right. This feels correct. That is the indication of what you are. And when you feel that, you're moving closer towards it. Mic drop.
PatrickHaize.com. Thanks for coming on the show, brother. Much love to you and your journey. And thank you for being here with all your presence. And it's just been a joy to get to know you and be your friend. One of the coolest things that came from me going out to Sedona. I know you also have people that come out to visit you that you do work with. So make sure if you are inspired by this that you go to PatrickHaize.com. Patrick, thank you for coming on the show, brother.
Thank you so much for having me, bro. Much love, man.